Okay, I think we're live. Are we live?
Fantastic. Well, we will greet our NextGen Nation then. Hello, NextGen Nation. Thank you for bearing with us as we get started. Welcome to our breakout session, How to Pick Your Battles, which causes help or hurt your career progression. My name is Megan Pleasant, and I am the Marketing Communications Specialist at GovLoop. If you're coming from the keynote, how fun was it to hear from Julian and Frida's dual perspectives? I know I got a lot of great tips about relaxing and not being burnt out. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of the summit has in store for us, including this very session. So let's get to it. If you're a parent, you know how critical it is to pick your battles. Kids can take umbrage with just about anything, but there are some infractions you must deal with. The same is true at work. If you fought every single battle to the end, you wouldn't have time to get any real work done. The key is figuring out which are essential and which you need to let go. But first, we have a couple of quick reminders to go over. Here's our housekeeping. If you're on Twitter, we'd love to know what you learned. Use the hashtag NextGenGov to share your takeaways. We also have some great additional resources available for you to download. They're on the right-hand side of your console. That includes this very slide deck with all this great information you'll see and learn soon, so you can take that away with you. So be sure to check that out. And we hope you don't have any technical difficulties, but if you do, send us a message to that Q&A tab. My colleague Kelly will get your questions answered. In that same Q&A portal, you can ask our expert questions. So don't be shy, drop them in whenever, and we will get to them throughout the session. We also have open chat available for you today, so you can talk to your fellow attendees. That'll be great. I know that we'll have some back and forth with our lovely speakers, so you'll definitely want to pay attention to that open chat. If you miss a few tidbits, don't worry. We're going to email you a link to the entire event tomorrow. It'll be sent directly to your inbox, so you can get every little morsel of this amazing conference. So we are giving out 1 CPE credit for your participation in today's session. There are 3 things that you do need to do. You need to stay and participate in the entire session. You need to take all of the polls that we're going to throw at you. And you need to fill out that post-event CPE evaluation to obtain your credit. So don't forget to do all of those to get that wonderful CPE. You can find the CPE evaluation in the resource module on the console or at the Resource Center in the main event. All of them will be emailed to you directly once we confirm you've met all the requirements, so stay tuned for that. So we're going to move on to our speaker. So very exciting. Today we've got Wendie Veloz, social impact strategist, coach, and consultant. Thank you, Wendie, for being here. We're so excited to hear from you. I'm going to hand things over to you now.
I realize I'm on mute. Hi, guys. Okay, we'll do that over again. So hi, everyone. I'm Wendie Veloz. I am a coach for social impact, and I help people who are starting a business or a nonprofit to uplevel their impact. And I also am a former government worker. So I am bringing this presentation to you as part of my consulting part of my business, which is to help organizations and teams navigate issues that actually affect sustainability. And so picking your battles, how you operate internally with your team, and how you make decisions is really important to how you sustain work that is being done, especially high quality work. And as a lot of people I noticed in the government, in your company affiliation and your organization affiliations, you're all over the map with what organizations you're from. And so I'm really excited for you to connect in the chat. I just want to highlight again what Megan said. The chat is super important for this session. We're going to talk a couple of times. It will stop and ask you to actually fill in things in the chat, because we want you to engage not only with each other, but also to be able to engage with us as well. So let's get started. Let's pop right into what are we going to be doing today. Oh, I said I wasn't going to advance my own slides, and then here I go advancing my own slides. So I'm going to go back to what I originally said was next slide, please. Let's go to the next slide and talk about who am I? I'm Wendie Veloz. Like I said, I worked in the federal government overseeing grants and technical assistance in the space of mental health, and particularly focusing on multi-sector partnerships around juvenile justice, education, and mental health. And I've spent about the last 2 years developing my business. And as a Latina business owner, I also have worked at the local level in public health in Houston. So let's go to the next slide. And let's set some expectations for the day. What are we talking about today? We are going to start off with discussing your priorities. I will show you an action-taking matrix that you can use to help you make decisions. And then we'll talk a little bit about what battles are worth fighting for, which ones might not, and how do you learn to let go, and how do you apply these things to your work and to what you're doing. So hopefully this will be super relevant for you, and you'll be able to find some value in one of these points and maybe all of these points. But the main goal for the session is that we have fun together, and that you guys definitely share your experiences and how these things might be relatable to you and what you're going through. So let's go to the next slide. And I see so many people here from the DC area. I'm in Maryland, so hi neighbors. It's good to see that a bunch of people are here from this area. All right, so let's talk about setting priorities. When we are trying to do good work, especially for people who are public servants, who are servant leaders, who identify as folks with a mission to help make the world a better place or to serve others, there's a lot of priorities that we're thinking about, not only for ourselves, but also for our organizations. And sometimes those priorities can be in conflict, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we need to first understand, what are our priorities, right? Like, what is our priority as a person? What is your priority as a worker? What is your priority for your career and where you're going in life? And how do you get past the challenging times? How do you get past things that happen or circumstances that happen where you have to take action and you need to make a decision to take action? And one of the ways that you decide to take action or not is by understanding your priorities. So your priorities are super duper important. And let's go to the next slide. They might look a little bit jumbled, something kind of like this, right? Where you've got this, I think, like, hey, I want to be an individual, I want to matter, but I also want to show up to work on time. I want to be there for my family and be able to do the things I need to do to be financially free and independent and all of these other things. I want to have some sort of sense that I, am part of a community and that I, do good work and have friends and all of these other things. These are all priorities. And sometimes when we're trying to decide what battles to pick and what to do with ourselves and our energy, these priorities can be in conflict with each other, usually around the concept of time. How much time do we have available? How much energy do we have available? There's only 24 hours in a day, and there's only one of us. So when you need to show up in all these different places, how you show up and what your priorities are really, really important. So I want to hear from folks. Let's get into the chat and see if any of this is starting to resonate with you. And definitely let me know, if anything's coming up for you about what your priorities are. Feel free to jump in the chat and tell us as well. But I want you to just understand that even as a worker in any organization, any company, any business, any government, nonprofit, it doesn't matter. Your priorities as an individual also matter in addition to the organization's priorities. Because your priorities, you have to show up every day. You have to do the work. You have to be able to be, well enough to be able to show up and do the work. So your priorities and how you use your time and your energy are really, really important as well. And you want to be able to bring it into alignment with your company, with your organization. And I love this. Rita says in the chat, health, family, and her fur baby. I could identify with that. Priority 1, get work done. Priority 2, go home, right? Yeah, so there's rest is a priority for someone else. So I love these. There's different types of priorities. Different types of people have different priorities. And you can use your priorities to interpret what your actions should be able to do later. Someone said, I just got married, so family is a priority. Thinking about retiring early is a #1 priority. Competing priorities are difficult. Do you choose work or family? So all of these things matter. And I want you to think about these priorities when we talk about the matrix, because that is a big part of the matrix, is understanding what are priorities for you? So I love seeing this: physical health and mental health. That's awesome. And please feel free to reply to each other. I just learned in this system, if you hover over one of the responses, there's a little double arrow, and you can click the double arrow, and that'll be able to reply directly to one of the comments. So if you see something that you like from someone else, feel free to go ahead and reply to their comment and start networking and sharing and connecting with other people. So in addition to priorities, the other way that we can think about what battles we want to choose is according to our values. What matters to us as people? Who are we, and what are our values? And if you don't have your values and you don't have your priorities, it's going to be really difficult sometimes when you need to make a hard decision, because you don't have any framework or anything to lean on to tell you this is in alignment or it may not be in alignment with what I want. So your values and your priorities, uber important. And I'm borrowing today from some friends of mine who are known as, they're Tasha and Brandon. They're a couple, and they're known as Rules and Rebellion. They have a podcast. They're all over social media, and they talk a lot about core values. So I couldn't say it any better than this, so I thought I'd borrow from them with their permission. Core values are the principles and ideas that drive your passions and your boundaries, as well as your goals and your dreams. So core values and understanding what your core values are not only gives you ability to put up a boundary and say no to some things, but it also gives you ability to say yes to the things that are in alignment with your goals and your dreams. And so when you're talking about your priorities and how you spend your life, your quality of life, as some people are saying in the chat, these core values and how you set those boundaries allow you to live the quality of life that you want to live. So you kind of have to have some conceptualization for yourself. What are these priorities? What are these core values? And how do they help me reach my goals and my dreams? So I have in the examples link for everyone. If you don't know what your core values are, you've never done a core values experience, a core values list before, you can go to this link, and it's in the, I believe in whatever your downloads module is, the slides will be in there. So you'll be able to click this link, but you can go and Google, list of core values and think about, what are 3, 4, 5 core values that are really important to you. And as you go through your journey of trying to make decisions on, is this the right battle for me or not, your core values are something that will help you understand yes or no what you do in the situation. And we'll talk a lot more about this in a minute, but these are 2 concepts that I wanted to anchor in really early on, that we're going to talk today all about priorities and core values, and these will come up again and again and again. So let's go to the next slide, and I want to see in the chat what's going on. Yes, I love this comment too. Setting boundaries are very important. You may lose people you thought were friends, but they weren't your friends to begin with. Friends, relationships, situations at work, colleague friendships, things like that. All of these things change over the course of our life, right? Like nothing stays the same, and our career will not stay the same. It ideally would keep evolving, right? As we're continuing to level up, continuing to get to new heights, continuing to reach new goals. So having some sort of sense of what are our core values and what are our priorities, that helps us anchor in which directions we're going as we go through that journey. So let's talk about my values. I wanted to bring you this list because I think this is important for me. This is a list that I developed when I first developed my business. When I stepped out on my own, I said, what do I want? Because you'll hear a lot of stories today of my personal experience of what I did not want. And I learned the hard way of what I didn't want, but I hadn't asked myself what I wanted, right? If I were to create my own organization, what do I actually want? What are my values? So integrity, hope, teamwork, success, innovation, and being with like-minded and like-hearted people. These are values that I have for my business and for what I'm doing, but these were already values I had when I worked in the government. And I like this. Jordan says that, there's risk in losing your job with boundaries, with setting boundaries. Absolutely. There's risk with everything, right? We'll talk a lot about risks and risks that I even took. And I think that with the risks, that's what the matrix that we'll talk about next is really going to help you think about that risk. And so I'm glad that you put that into the chat, because we'll talk more about the risk as well. And then, of course, there's people dropping links to other lists of values. So thank you for sharing those kinds of things in the resources in the chat. I appreciate that. And let's go to the next slide. So I want you to think about, for everyone who's here, and I'm going to ask Megan to give me her 3. So I'm going to prompt her ahead of time for three values that you have that you want to share with us today. So I gave you my list of 5. I think if I were to go down to the 3 most, probably the most important one for me, I think, is integrity. That one comes up a lot. But Megan, do you have like one or 2 or 3 values that you could share with us? And then if anything you saw in the chat that resonated with you, I was also curious. Let's just check in and see what's going on.
Absolutely. I am high on integrity as well. That is a top one for me. You need to stand behind what you say. Honesty is also a big one for me as well. And I think teamwork is so essential. It's so ingrained in government work. It's so hard to get things done without that collaboration. So I think all 3 of those are fantastic values that people can focus on to achieve their goals. And definitely there's a lot of good chat down here. Empathy. I think people forget about empathy a lot. I love that.
That's a good one. Any of the comments that you saw earlier that resonated with you?
Yes, actually, I really think that boundary comment, that you can lose your job by setting boundaries, that's terrifying for people. That's your income. I mean, that's a core of who you are. So it's hard to find that balance of this is my line in the sand versus I really need this job. So that's a really good balance that people have to strike.
Yeah. And we're going to go right head first into that one. So I didn't want to give anything away, but that one is like a core in the poll. So I wanted to put a pin on it and just say that one is a very important comment. I appreciate it a lot. I also appreciate this honesty, empathy, faith, family, truth, integrity, humility, honor, courage. Like these are such qualities that you expect in people who are giving in public service, right? Like these are what you want to see people have. These are the kinds of people that you think are drawn to careers in public service, right? These are the values that we share. And so I think that even just in this population of people who happen to be with us today, it's important to recognize that we do probably have a lot of shared core values because we've come to the same place in our careers with this same mission, right? And that's really uber important as well. And so I appreciate a lot of the overlap that we're seeing. And the word integrity seems to like pin in with people too, because I think sometimes, which is frightening, and you said it's true, that we can be people of integrity operating in spaces that do not have integrity. And I'm going to say that again. I will give you examples today of people can be people of integrity operating in spaces where there is no integrity. And you constantly see this sometimes in different environments, in different levels of government even. So it's important for us, if that's the place of authenticity for us, to know how to navigate a space that is not in alignment with our values, right? Trust your gut. I love that. I talk about intuition a lot in my podcast, a lot in the work that I do, because I think that intuition is one of the ways, one of the unique things about us as humans that we can tap into to tell us if something is in alignment with our values and our priorities. Usually our intuition will be the first place to kind of guide us about how in alignment we are. So this is awesome. All right. So I know we're 20 minutes in. We've already got a lot going on in the chat, which I think is great. We're going to keep it rocking on. Let's go one more slide in. All right. So I just started giving you a clue of like, how do you know when to actually pick your battles? And the reason why I put this little pyramid here is because I think this is probably something that you guys will even recognize in the work that you're doing with the public or in the work you're doing on behalf of the government, that we're always thinking about the vision, the mission, the goals, the objectives, and the strategies, right? And that's kind of a layering of approaches that we tend to use over and over again for different things. It's the same thing as the way our organizations are structured, the same way our grant programs are structured. And this is something that if you were to pour values on top of it, like some salt or something, just kind of pour your values on top of it, how do you get alignment of your values with all of these other levels, right? With all these other things, with the vision, with the mission, with the goals, the objectives, and the strategies? How do you make sure that all of that takes place with the values of you as a person and the values of the organization. And this is something that I think when you talk about, well, what happens if you feel like, you know, getting out of line in some way threatens your job or it makes you vulnerable? It's usually because somewhere in here, when you're operating in your place of values, it takes you out of alignment with the mission, the vision, the goals, or the strategies, or even the objectives of the organization in some way. And it could really be troublesome sometimes. And so I'll give you some examples of that. Let's go to the next slide. So how do you really like actually know when to take action? I think when you find that you're not in that alignment, when your values and your priorities are not in alignment with the organization's priorities and actions, right? And so the organization's stated values might be something, but the organization's actions might be another thing. And that's when you have to really, really ask yourself, is this a battle worth fighting for? Is this being out of alignment with my priorities and my values? Is this worthwhile or not? And I'll give you a series of examples where you can ask yourself, is this worthwhile or not? But before we do that, we're going to talk about what I call the high-low matrix. And we can go on to the next slide. And I also want to say a lot of the times when you're feeling out of alignment, you feel like that picture of all of those bulls, like everybody's maybe going in one direction. You're the one like with everybody coming at you in a different direction. So I put that picture in there because I know it could feel like you're very much, when you're out of alignment, it can feel like everything is coming at you. Oh, and I love this. Yvette says, I had to leave my job last year in the government because it was not in alignment with my values and the burnout signs became apparent. And she was only within 11 months of being on that job. It can happen fast. And the reason why I talk a lot about this is because of the burnout. And I think that I got to a place of burnout, and I'll talk more about my story in a minute. But I think that what you're talking about, Yvette, is really true. When you're out of alignment with the organization, you can get into that burnout phase much quicker because things compound and compound and compound. And they almost seem to just kind of get negative. And it's hard to move it back in the opposite direction. Not only you as a person who's experiencing this, but you and your career, where you have these goals that you want to attain to move forward. Once you start feeling like you're going in a negative direction, it's really hard to course correct back, but you can, right? And I think that that's, and it's concerning when your values do not align with your leadership. This I've experienced, Jacqueline, a few times. And I think we all, have gone through leadership changes multiple times. If you've been in the government for a long time, whether you're at any level, you'll have gone through different levels of political officials, different levels of non-political officials, different levels of leadership above you, different levels of people below you. All of that, everybody comes to this work for their own values, right? We're all supposed to be kind of subscribing to the organizational values together, but we don't always get brought into that in a way that's very inviting or makes them a priority. So you can see that very quickly you can be out of alignment with values of leadership within the organization. And even the leadership's values could be out of alignment with the stated organization's values, right? So there's so many levels to this. So how do we make a choice, right? Like, this is what I wanted to be concrete for people. Like, how do you actually make a choice? Well, this is the high-low matrix that I talked about. You can think about it as this. When you are trying to make decisions, we want to be up in this right quadrant. We want to be working on things, spending our energy in places that are going to matter and get results and get to the objectives and the outcomes for everyone, for us as people, for the organization. We want to think about what is high priority and what is high reward, right? There is an incentive, there is a reason this feels good, it's in alignment with my values, or it's in alignment with my priorities. There's a reward here. We want to always try to spend most of our energy in this quadrant. But what we recognize is that it's not always possible with every scenario to only be doing things that are high reward and high priority. However, what we want to do as much as possible is to try to see, with all of the different situations that we're in, if we are trying to pick a battle, is it going to result in an outcome that is high reward and high priority for us? If it is, then it's worth what you need to do to pick that battle, right? It's worth what you need to do to move forward with your values and with your priorities in a way that feels good to you. And I love that there's a lot of comments in the chat. Former leadership was not on the same page with the team. And, you know, they were talking about transferring to other programs. That's part of my story as well. So I love a lot of this discussion in the chat is overlapping with some of the next couple of places that we're going in this presentation. So the other thing I'll say is on the opposite side, one of the hardest things for us to do is to spend our energy in places that are low priority and low reward, because it doesn't feel good, because it feels like a waste of time, or it feels like something that's counterproductive to what we want. So in those times, we also have to ask ourselves, is this worth our energy? Is this worth actually picking up this battle? Because it doesn't probably feel like something I really, really, really want to do. But it's maybe something I need to consider, because maybe it should be a higher priority, or maybe there is a reward here that I'm not seeing. So in this matrix, you're able to ask yourself these questions about how do I feel about this decision? How do I feel about the potential outcome? What do I want? What do I really want from this? And if I'm going to pick a battle, is it going to be worth it, right? So we'll use this matrix to talk about the polls. I think the next slide is the first poll. I'm going to walk you through just the generic scenario. As you're taking the poll, I'll walk you through a story that is not the generic scenario, but it's actually from my real life. So you'll get to peek into my real life story. And then when we go through what the poll results are, I'll wait to give you my answer to what I actually did. But I'll walk you through at least this metric of how do you make a decision, like what I had to make a decision. And we'll use the chat to kind of talk back and forth about this. All right. Let's go to the next slide. I think the next, is it the poll? Oh no, sorry. This is the next one. So we talked already about this a little bit. The battles that are worth fighting for tend to be things that are high priority, high reward, and are low reward and high priority. And the reason why I added low reward and high priority is because a lot of the times the priority tends to win. And you know this because you probably have been assigned to return a document with ideas to your boss in 24 hours with something, or to come up with talking points for something that's super high priority. And it may feel very low reward, but it's something that you have been asked to do. So sometimes the priority is being set by other folks and not us. And it becomes a battle that we have to choose, because we don't get a choice sometimes on what our priorities are. So that's why I have these two here as battles that are usually, you have to ask yourself really critically, is this worth fighting for? Is it in alignment with my values? Is it in alignment with my priorities as a person? Is usually in these two scenarios. All right, so let's see. Let's go to the next one. Here we go. Here is the first poll. All right, so I'm not facilitating the poll, right?
Nope, you are good. We just need people to respond. We're going to give them about a minute just to make sure that everybody gets a chance to do so. But
perfect.
In the meantime, we can chat about.
Yeah, well, we're going to do story time. We're doing our story time for the workplace bullying story. So while you all fill out the chat, this is the real life scenario and Wendie Veloz's life. So we're not, I feel like we're in our telenovela today. So when I first started the government, I came in as a presidential management fellow as a GS9 employee, and it's 2 years fellowship. If you don't know what that is, it's a 2-year fellowship, and you eventually become an employee if you successfully meet all the criteria. And I very much came into a power differential on a team with a senior team member who was very upset with me one afternoon and decided to try to get into my office and continue an argument that had started kind of like, where I don't even remember what it was about really, but she had been bullying me for a while, and I just felt threatened. So I went into my office and I locked the door. And she spent about a good 15 to 20 minutes trying to convince me to continue this discussion and actually like get into the office, shaking the door handle, trying to get in. And I did not want to continue the conversation. So at that point, my thoughts were, do I report this, right? Do I talk about this bullying that's been going on? is this a high priority for me? Well, it's kind of a high priority because it's happening every day. Is this a high reward for me? There's not a lot of incentive to continue to be bullied. So yeah, there's probably a high reward in here somewhere. But what did I do is the question. So I want to go back. Hopefully that gives people enough time. And
yes,
I know people are starting to
the results here. There we go.
Okay, so workplace bullying, is it worth fighting for? 61% yes, 4% no, 5% no, 33% it depends, right? It depends. So I'm in that it depends phase. In that scenario, the senior member of the team was actually going to another part of the organization, to another part of the agency, and I would never have to see them again. So it wasn't worth reporting, going through mediation, whatever else was going to happen, because there really wasn't going to be a lot of recourse or a lot of healing or any more work together. So in that sense, it wasn't it depends, right? It wasn't worth fighting for. So I did what I could to shield myself, and then I moved on. And it doesn't mean that I didn't have to heal as a person from that experience, or to learn as a leader from that experience. I did, but I also didn't need to take any formal sort of action on it. And let's see what's in the chat around this one. I want to see if anything's come up that's been, well, I've not been looking at the chat. What do you see in the chat, Megan, that's important to highlight?
I think this one is a good one. It's best to ignore everyone that has bully behaviors, but it can't be ignored. It has to be addressed and documented. I think documentation, if you're in a high stress situation that's continuing, is so important.
We're going to talk about that too. Yes. Yes, that word is important. All right. I think people talking about life skills, that life skills carrying over from home into where the workplace doesn't always transfer. I think that that's recognized, right? That it kind of becomes what do you come to the workplace with, and what are your values and what are your experiences? And sometimes they don't match with others. Let's see. I think that yeah, it's workplace violence. I think, you surprisingly how easily things can escalate to on the scale of violence, right? And so I think that you go from conversation to what does bullying really mean, or what are the behaviors, right? So lots of thoughts here. I think we could probably go on and on, but I just wanted to lift up some of those things out of the comment. And I like this one too. This is important. Government is big and yet small. You never know. You might find later in your career that person is your sub. I think you run into people over and over again. It's like a big city, small town situation, right? A lot of us are connected within 2 or 3 degrees, and somebody's husband is your next boss, right? So you never know like where you're going to come up. And I think that that's also important with what is the reward, right? Like, what is the reward for going through this process potentially later, where I might end up having a different scenario with the same person. And I think that this is right. This is a great comment. Team, right? Like the idea of team, there's no place for bullying in the idea of team, but I think that we all could use a lot more support in developing teams in the government and being able to get through, what does it do to really make a really good team? Okay, so next poll, we're going to talk about discrimination. Is this worth fighting for? So this is a big word. So let's let people vote and see. And I'll say from my personal experience, the reason that I left the federal government was because of discrimination. And when I was in about the 13th-ish year of my career, probably about the 12th year of my career, I requested to go to a training that was for Latina professionals, and that request was denied. And the reasons that I was given was related to that they didn't feel they could support this at the time. According to the administration that was in charge, that wasn't the type of support that they could offer for me, but it also, in their documentation, they wrote that it wasn't in alignment with my job, right? So there was a mix match between what was said in person and what was documented. So you're talking about documentation. You're not always the only one documenting. And if you are the worker and not the manager, you sometimes don't get to be in charge of what gets officially documented. So thinking about that, you keep your own documentation, check number one for the word documentation, you keep everything on your own. But when it comes to things like this, where there's gray area between what's said in person or what's actually documented in email or record, it's difficult sometimes to prove, right? So I'll tell you more about this scenario in a minute, but let's go to the poll results and see. And 69% yes, and 30-ish, 28% said no. Or, I mean, sorry, said it depends, and 2.3% said no. So I think that overwhelmingly people say, yes, if I feel I've been discriminated against, this is in direct non-alignment with my values, right? Like that is completely not in alignment with my priorities. So this is probably something that I'm going to take action on, right? And when I felt that way, I did. And I ultimately, two things happened. One, in that process, I was moved from one position to another position, just laterally moved with no reason why on a Wednesday, just moved on over. And when that happened, my career was sort of abruptly stopped from going anywhere forward, right, or anywhere higher. So I made the decision not only to leave the government, not leave the federal government, but also to, in that, open a lawsuit and say, hey, this discrimination took place. If not for winning, but also just for the reason of having documentation that this was happening at the time, right? Having record that this was happening at the time. And I think that was a battle worth fighting for sure. Although what happened in the end was that I went all the way through the EEOC process and the Equal Opportunities Commission, if you don't know what EEOC is, and went all the way through and didn't end up winning that lawsuit. So, even though you pick the battle, it doesn't always mean you're going to win the battle, right? So that's important to share. Okay, so let's see what's in the chat really quickly.
If you don't mind, we've got a Q&A for you that kind of dovetails into that same thing.
Yeah.
It said, how can you fight bullying when the person ignores you and you cannot voice your concerns because upper management is also ignoring you?
I think that's where the documenting comes into play really heavily, because if you have the documentation to be able to present tangibly, whether that's through email, through records of conversations, through examples that you're able to collect that have clear evidence, if you're able to show a pattern, then it really shouldn't be ignored. And there should be able to not only be like a formal HR complaint, but also, through your own manager, there should be an avenue for you to share that documentation. So the ignoring, I think that there's only so long people can ignore when you have like irrefutable incidents that have happened and you're able to document the pattern. So let's see what folks say in the chat about making yourself torpedo-proof by being indispensable to the organization, usually being the best at your position. I think that goes far, but it doesn't always make yourself 100% far, because I tried that one. So doesn't make yourself 100% indispensable. I think, yes, reporting, calling out discrimination, all of these things are important. So I just wanted to go back and Priscilla reminding us that HR Connect is a good resource for mediation. So let's go to the next one, because I think that this one will also resonate. So this one is just in general, your team's work, when, with the work of what you're doing and what's going on with your team, is that something that's worth fighting for? Just, what you've accomplished or how you're able to accomplish work as a team. And let's see. And so I'll tell you guys another part of my journey. Once I left the federal government, I went to the local government, and I decided the month that we were going to have a pandemic, I decided to go to public health, right? Because this was like a really good idea in my head. And we have this pandemic. I end up working 80-hour weeks. I'm the director of an office of policy at the local level in a county government. And I go to work one day, and we had a leadership change. And the new leader, I recognized that she was giving our team a whole lot of work. And when we were doing the work, we would be told that it wasn't what she asked for, or she would ask a bunch of questions and question the quality of the work or the information that we gave her, particularly because a lot of our work was analyst type work. And what happened was ultimately she was just like picking. And I recognized that something was a brew, but I didn't really know what. But what I also knew was that my team was really good. And my team, I definitely believed in their work. So anytime that she would pick, I, as a middle manager, was the person who had to stick my neck out on the line and stand up for the team, which was very uncomfortable. So first time I ever had to do that, because I went from being a team member to being a leader, right? So when you move into the C-suite leadership sort of level, you have to stick your neck out sometimes. And this is where the question is, is your team's work worth fighting for? So let's see what the poll said. 41% said yes, 5.2% said no, and 53.2% said it depends, right? And I think that it really does depend. It does. And so for me, what ended up happening was the leader, which I didn't know, and the new leadership had been told to get rid of all of the old executives from the previous leader. And no one could have known that one day on a Wednesday, I would come to work and I lost my job. I was, a director of a policy office, and then I wasn't. And what I recognized was the poking and the poking and the poking and the fighting and the fighting and the fighting was an attempt to get me to leave before having to be let go, right? And that was a tactic. And so the battle that I chose, which was to stand up for my team, either way, I wasn't going to have a job. It didn't matter. The outcome didn't matter. I wouldn't have been able to know that. But in that experience, what I can share with you is that sometimes in these battles, we don't know what the outcome will be, and nor can we predict it. But you have to decide, if you're someone operating with integrity, are you going to throw your team under the bus and say, yes, ma'am, we did the wrong activity, we'll go back and do this other one? Or are you going to say, no, that wasn't what you asked for. Our team presented you with a viable response. Here it is. Right. So there's different ways that we have to choose to act, and they may be around our values and our priorities. Yes, I appreciate Dolly for for sharing what you shared. So yes, let's go on to the next slide. And let's talk about, so other examples of battles that are worth fighting for. I just want you to fire them off into the chat really fast, because I want to get us going. We're getting close to the end of time. What are some battles that you guys feel are worth fighting for? Because we're going to jump right into what some battles are that maybe not. All right, and then we'll end with some tactics. Okay, so next slide. And if you guys in the chat can just give me examples of things that you think are worth fighting for to you, that would be great. So learning to let go, this is where we're going to shift into, well, how do we decide what not to fight for? Because I think somebody said in the chat, you're a lover, not a fighter, which I can appreciate that. So where do we find opportunities to present the love versus to present some sort of turmoil? Places where there's personal preference involved. Because sometimes we as people just prefer work or prefer things to be a certain way, right? We want the Brita in the fridge versus the Brita on the side. Oh, my light went out. But we don't necessarily want always to feel like our personal preferences are being overrun all the time sometimes. So we probably are thinking, okay, how do we keep our personal preferences and also our values and also our priorities, right? Times when there are gossip or rumors involved, like that's just not a time that we really want to be fighting a battle around something that might be hearsay or might not be true. So always thinking about critically, probably not worth fighting for if it's possibly something that's on the realm of gossip or rumors. Perfectionism, times when we're just being contrary because we're trying to be perfect, right? Times where we really want to have something go really well, and we might have great intent, but we're causing strife in the team because we're trying to make it perfect. That's a time where you might need to think about, is this worth fighting for? I love somebody says your sanity. Yeah, I think your sanity is definitely worth fighting for. Times when you receive constructive feedback. We always receive constructive feedback or feedback, and sometimes that feedback is not feeling so constructive to us. And so is it worth going back and saying, hi, what is this about? I'd like to have a discussion, versus just letting it go and being able to address it in some other way. So these are times where I think it might not be worth fighting for, but there might be other options on how to resolve something in these types of examples the bullets on the right. I mean, sorry, on the left. On the right, when you're thinking about it in terms of our matrix, when we talk about low reward, low priority, if something is not rewarding and is not a priority, then it likely is something that we need to put in the parking lot, or we don't need to really focus on it. If it's something that's high reward, like we're really, really excited about it, this is really going to be great, but it's not a priority for us personally or not a priority for the organization, then we also probably need to ask ourselves, is this something that we need to be spending our energy on? Is this a battle we need to pick up? Let's go to the next slide. All right. So we talked about, and I'm going to go through some of these ones that were in the chat that were worth fighting for. And then while I do that, if you can drop some examples of battles that are not worth fighting for in the chat, and then we'll keep rocking. So work-life balance, I think that's a great battle worth fighting for. Vacation time, training, that was like I mentioned my example with training, your sanity, so like that one, professional development, any kind of like telework, those kinds of things. So I think those are great examples of things that are worth fighting for. Here's a good question too. Do you fight when you have a varying opinion or on whose job it is, right? Who's responsible for something? I think that that's one that in a team can get really haywire really fast, is the discussion of who's going to take on a new responsibility or who's going to extend themselves more when they're already extended, right? I think that that's a good one to question. Fairness and pay is worth fighting for. Okay, so let's go to the next one. The next slide. All right, so let's do some quick tips and then we'll end pretty soon. Actually, we're almost done with our time here together. Thank you for being here with us. So what can you do to really let go effectively? Focus on what matters. We talked about priorities. We talked about values. You have a worksheet that you should be getting after the session. If you weren't able to download it during the session, that gives you time to write out what your priorities and values are. I'd highly recommend you do that. And you think about, how do you prioritize your battles with your personal values and your priorities as the litmus test for that. And you can let go battles that are not aligned with your values or are trivial, or that don't have a significant impact on your work or the work of the organization. So those are two ways that you can think about when it's time to really let go, is when you need to focus on what matters. Let's go to the next one. Staying positive. I know as much as it can be difficult, especially when you're in that downward spiral of things happening to you or things happening around you that you don't understand, you can get caught up in negative emotions, and the stress of it is very, very monumental. And all of the three examples that I gave you, my body was going haywire and was experiencing a ton of stress that was very toxic. So what can you do? I think even what's helped me out getting through those is maintaining a positive attitude, understanding that this is part of a bigger picture, and that there are ways to really navigate a negative situation that may not turn it exactly into a positive one, but might improve it. And then always thinking about, again, what really matters to me? Where am I going to put my energy? And then the last one, I think this is the last tip, is to just continue to communicate. This is where we talked about documentation being really important, communicating with your manager. If you have a good relationship with your manager, if you don't have a good relationship with your manager, finding someone like HR or someone else who can help with these kinds of scenarios is important. And, being able to communicate what your decision is. If you decide to pick up a battle and you need to do a formal HR process, you need to communicate what that is and, be able to start that HR process with the right documentation. And a lot of the formal processes for complaints require documentation. They require forms to be filled out. They require waits in between reviews, all kinds of different things. So you will have to be really clear on what you're communicating. And one thing I can say as a tip is, if something really bad has happened to you, like you need to report discrimination, you need to report bullying, after the incident, take a audio recording of the word by word, play by play of what you remember, because you will have to write the entire story out later. And that will be super duper helpful to you, not only any kind of documenting you're doing by emailing or writing notes, but in addition to that, write yourself a voice memo. So let's see, I think there's probably, one more slide and I think we're done. Yeah. So wrap up, key takeaways: stay in alignment with your values and your priorities, focus on your why and what matters, and picking your battles that just really ones that help you advance as a person and advance in your career and advance in those things that matter in your life, and continue being awesome public servants. So yeah, so that's it. So Megan, I don't know if there's other things came through in the chat, but that was the end of it. And then I think there's just one last slide on where people can find me.
We have one question, if you have just 1 second here. I'm leaving a position within the legislative branch after 10 years, and I'm now working for an executive agency. I find that people in my department are very lazy, and it's not the culture I am used to. How do you express that you want to do more?
Ooh, I think this is a good question. Ways that I expressed that was to put an individual development plan together and to explore the training opportunities and the opportunities for like going into other government types of positions as a it's a TDY or a tour of duty. I put that into my individual development plan and I presented that to my leadership. And when it got approved, I was able to go to CDC in Tanzania. I was able to go on another couple of projects for the White House, one in New Orleans, and I literally like went and lived there for 6 months or 8 months. And those types of things really valuable to me, but it was because I put the legwork in to put in the actual individual development plan with the goal for those types of experiences to happen. So I think that that's one route that you can do, because usually that's a more of a, you know, kind of a formal way of saying, hey, I really want to do more here.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all we have, Wendie. This was such an amazing session. I got so many helpful hints on how I can be productive and pick my battles. So thank you so much for everything. I'm sure everyone else had some fabulous takeaways, and they're going to take those slides with them as well. Thank you also to our 2023 NextGen Partner Alliance for helping to put on today's NextGen Summit. Let's talk a little bit about what's next. We do have a few quick reminders before we log off this session. So don't forget to fill out your CPE evaluation to get credit. You took those amazing polls and you were here the whole time, so go ahead and get that credit. If you haven't already, head over to the exhibit hall to check out our booths as well. They have additional information and resources. And we are going to have our lunch keynote speaker up next at 12:30 Eastern. You can access that session through the conference hall in the main environment. We'll have 3 presentations. Own your journey. No one is going to plan your career for you. Inclusion in action, and nothing stays the same. How to embrace, not fight change. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you again, Wendie, for your valuable insight, and we'll see you in the next session. So thanks for joining.